sustainable built environment and where does the disaster resilience fit in? Ladies and gentlemen, I think all of you can remember in the description of the sustainable development goal, I mentioned the importance of inclusivity, safety, and the resilience as well. So today, I believe this session will be very productive for all of you. And giving a brief introduction about the resource person today, we have our keynote speaker, Dr. Chandra Sirivalan. He's a senior lecturer at the Department of Civil Engineering, University of Morador, and he has completed his Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Morador and Master of Science of Civil Engineering from the University of Tokyo. And he has completed his PhD in Construction Management from the University of Calgary, and is currently the Secretary of Association of Disaster Risk Management Professionals Sri Lanka. And he's expert in both construction management and disaster risk management. And I believe we have the ideal person to talk about this wonderful topic today with us. Before moving into the beginning of the session, we have a small announcement to make. After the initial discussion, after the initial presentation, there will be a question and answer session and discussion. And if you have any questions to be directed, you can direct them through our Zoom chat feature, or you will have the opportunity to unmute your microphones and ask your questions. So without further ado, let me have the privilege to invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Chandra Sirivalan, to continue this wonderful session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Randula. I hope you can hear me clearly. Let me share my screen. I hope my screen is visible to you.
Yes, sir, very all good.
Okay, right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Randula, and thank you very much, Sasindu and the team for giving me this opportunity to talk about something which I really care. Three things actually. One is sustainability, secondly, built environment, and thirdly, the disaster resilience. Okay, so then today's topic is like sustainable development goals, like that is the context or the scope. And we all are bound to achieve these targets. These are not just imaginary things that we all are planning to achieve them by 2030. Then the question comes in, where does this disaster resilience fit in? Right? Because today, if you look around, even today, right now, why we are having this meeting virtually, it is because we living in COVID since 2020, March, almost like 1.5 years, right? So then, how does this disaster resilience affect achieving these sustainable development goals? And specifically, we are looking at the goal number 11, because that is again the scope of our talk today, and we will move on. So let me introduce myself. Who am I? So I was interested in working on these disasters when I was probably in your age, and now you can guess my age, but it is fine. So this is me in this lorry. We are on our way to collect relief for tsunami affected communities, and then that made me really passionate about studying it, because there were many people were affected, especially in southern province. We went to Hambantota to help people, and the things that we have experienced, you guys might be really small. The things that we have experienced is really devastating. And then we had to work with Sri Lanka Army to take the dead bodies out from Hambantota Salt Lagoon. And then I for my undergraduate research also, I have selected using alternative building materials, because at that time there was a huge boom for construction industry to find out there was a scarcity for building materials, and then there was a need for finding out alternative building materials. So then we were under the guidance of Professor Mrs. Chinta Jayasinghe, we were experimenting how to use soil mixed with sand and cement. And actually we won an award as well, which is in Holcim Sustainability Awards in 2006. And then I went to do my master's. I worked at University of Moratuwa under the guidance of Professor Samantha Hettiarachchi for a tsunami resilience project, and then went to Tokyo to study further about that subject. And then after finishing my master's in Tokyo, moved to Canada to do my PhD in project management. And then now I am back. So I am working with Disaster Management Center and many other agencies, but I really, really love to teach. So that is my passion, working with students and then sharing my experiences. Therefore, when Sasindhu and the team invited me for this talk, even though these days we are really busy with many things, I wanted to come and then talk about something which I really care about. Okay, so Corona, all of you know, and then these are the very recent results or the statistics. Can you see United Kingdom, they were doing so well, and then now they are jumping up again. And then Sri Lanka, we are going down, hopefully, but who knows, right? So when you look at this number, but we have to live with it. Can you imagine that since December 2019, we lost almost 4 million people, right? And it all started in China, and then moved to Italy. We heard about the horror stories in Italy, and then to Iran, and then to South Korea, into UK and the US and Russia and India, and now it is all around. And now we are talking about different variants even, right? So now that that pandemic, that small virus, it started to create its own versions, right? And Mami Mitsuri, she is the special representative of UNDRR and she mentioned that COVID-19 has demonstrated that we are all connected, sometimes catastrophically, and until we all are safe, none of us is safe, right? So it's like we were talking before Corona, like how good it to be connected. So value of being connected with each other. But Corona made us being disconnected, right? Physically, we are disconnected still. So small virus, the impact a small virus made, like have we ever, who imagined this kind of a scenario, right? Okay, so then probably these days vaccinations are going on. Probably with the vaccinations, hopefully things will be get better in the future within 1 or 2 years, probably 1.5 years. But then what will happen? Business as usual. Okay, but point is, now first wave came, like, I mean, many waves came with COVID, and then now we are facing the recession with comes with the COVID, right? So these many stories are floating around, whether we don't know whether these things are true or not, but recession is inevitable, right? And then there is something bigger than all of this, which we don't care, that is the climate change. Corona might be able to, we can overcome Corona with a vaccine, but what about the climate change? And what is the role of built environment professionals on safeguarding our communities in this this natural or man-made phenomenon? Bill Gates said, solving COVID-19 is easy compared with climate change. Solving climate change would be the most amazing thing humanity has ever done. By comparison, ending the pandemic is very easy, right? So we were struggling so much with this COVID situation, and Bill Gates says, are you kidding me? This the climate change is the bigger thing, right? So we still in our day-to-day context, are we caring about this bigger threat? And now the bigger corporations are moving towards the net zero, carbon negative, and then they are spending so much of money for climate innovation funds and all that. Never to mention that they might be the people who have all created this issue at the first place. But forget about that for an instance. Let's move on. We can't help it with that right now. And Amazon also, they are going carbon neutral very soon. But still, there are many people, even very recently, I was in a roundtable discussion with one of leading construction company owners. Still, they don't believe that climate change is real. They said, we were doing projects when I was explaining about the impacts of climate change, and then he said to me, it is not real because I go to Maldives like 3 times per month, but nothing has happened over these last 20 years. They were predicting it is gone underwater, but still now they are building 3-story buildings, right? Okay, forget about that. But this is the World Economic Forum's predictions in the in the near future. What are the top risks based on the likelihood of occurrence, and then what are the top risks of when compared to the impact? As you can see, extreme weather, climate action failure, human environmental damage. These green color ones are the related to environment. Can you see the top 4? And the next are not what we thinking of, like digital power concentration, digital inequality, right? Cyberspace failure. Have you ever imagined about these things? And then the impact wise, the infectious diseases, and then green color ones are again the related to environmental, right? Biodiversity loss, natural resource crisis, human environmental damage. So what will happen if there is a food, like, are we ready for food scarcity? Most probably within next 5 to 10 years would going to occur. What about the tropical climate resilience, right? Have you ever considered about them? And these are the some of the data. We are current level is 1950s here, and then current level is the highest compared to the over the history. And climate risk index, according to German Watch, we are number 2 in 2019. Some say these numbers are wrong, but in the climate risk index we are number 2. So are we considering these things into our decision making, policy making? Look at these numbers. So I want to highlight one another thing here. This focus onto this natural disaster. I will get back to this later, but just to put your attention to this natural disaster, which is, I got this data from our world data yesterday, and as you can see, these ash color ones are the extreme weather, right? And all the others are caused by natural disasters, caused by natural phenomena, like over the recent years. Maybe because during these times disasters were not reported, but we don't know. But still, as you can see, from if you compare it from 1950 to 2020, the trend where we are heading, right? Okay, so then what are the climate change plus disaster, climate change induced disaster risk? Sea level rise. We are being an island. Heat waves and extreme temperatures. We live in tropical environment. Droughts. Again, we live in tropical environment. Extreme rainfall. Of course, we recently had. Now we are going through this southwest monsoon, right? Tropical storms. So you name it, everything is there. We have the recipe of a country, we are like vulnerable to all these climate-induced disasters. Are we ready? That is the question. The next thing is now people saying, they are arguing that climate change is not real. That is because the Maldives is still they are constructing these three-story building and it's still not under the water. That is why they are saying it. Yeah, I remember my father is also saying when I was a kid, son, sea level is going to rise and then Sri Lanka will be completely inundated by water. I was so scared, right? But yeah, of course, still Sri Lanka is there, Maldives is there, but do you feel how hot that is in our day-to-day environment? And recently this news came out, right? So we people struggling hard to breathe, and the intensity and then the frequency of rainfalls have been gone up, right? So then what will happen if you project this to next 20 to 10 to 20, 30, 40 years later, right? When you guys becoming elders, right? And then is there any connection between humans on this? Like in the picture in my left hand side and then picture in the right hand side, Wuhan, in Chinese city where everything started, where it's covered with smoke and dust and all these bad air, and then now it is being cleared after during this lockdown period. Now I don't know what is the current situation right now, right? So then obviously there is a human connection. Okay, so this brings me to this to our topic, that is now we are here, right? So we are here, today's work. So okay, we go as business as usual, and then we have these 17 goals, yeah, and we continue as usual. Nothing going to be changed, and then we are going to produce more and more, and then our our behaviors would be the same, and then what would happen? And then like some sort of a transformation, and then of our society, and then the way we live, and then the way we take our decisions, policies, and all that. Then we will achieve certain targets, and then there will be low emissions, and then the temperature will be a certain level. And if you completely transform the way we live, only we will go into net zero, and then we will achieve all the climate targets, and then there will be a better world for our future generations. That is the definition of sustainability, where we borrowed this everything, environment, natural resources, and everything from the future generations, and then we are living on debt, literally, technically. Okay, so then these are the, like, I don't need to explain, you guys are the ambassadors, you know everything. And then like I try to connect this with the disasters, and then the climate change for action, right? Out of 17, there is a connection to 10. No poverty. If they, how come food security or the crops going to survive when the climate change? Zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality of education, industry, innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, life below water, life on land. These are the 10 goals, right? But as built environment professionals, mainly we can focus on 9 and 11, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and sustainable cities and communities, especially 11. Okay, in 2015, there is something happened. Entire world get together, and then they decided to bring all this framework into one platform. Like, if we think, okay, we can achieve sustainable development goals all alone, it is not we are not getting the full picture correctly. So we have to look what are the other frameworks, with different targets set by different frameworks, and then how these interconnected with each other. What is the connection between each other, and how not achieving one target given by one framework would resulted in not achieving another given by another framework. Overall, what we are planning to do is achieving sustainable development goals by 2030. All these agreements are also set for 2030. They were initiated in 2015 and set to achieve them by 2030. I will be taking three main targets, frameworks, Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, sustainable development goals, and Paris climate change agreement, right? So Sendai is a Japanese city. Japan is, like I did my master's in Tokyo. There are many hazards are there, predominantly earthquakes. Sometimes I lived in an 8-story building, top floor, and then that building start to sway when there is an earthquake, right? So then that is why they are the pioneers of setting these frameworks for achieving this Sendai framework. And then sustainable development goals with that connected to DRR. And let me tell you what you want to achieve by Sendai framework. Okay, Sendai framework has one global outcome, one goal, 7 global targets, 13 guiding principles, 4 priorities for action at 4 levels: local, national, regional, and global. And there is a role to the stakeholders. There is a role to play by the stakeholders, and not only it is not by all alone. There should be a global partnerships and international corporations. Imagine we being all alone, shutting us off from the rest of the world, and then how we survive in this COVID, right? Without vaccine, how are we going to survive, right? So that is why these international corporations are important. Global partnerships are important, right? So let's move on. So just keep this in mind, right? So there is a framework called Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and they have 7 global targets, 13 guiding principles, and so on. What they want to achieve by these 7 global targets? They want to reduce 4, increase 3. What they want to reduce? Mortality in the global population. They want to reduce the average number of people deaths by 2030 when compared to 2005 to 2015. That is the previous framework. And number of affected people in the global level, economic loss by the disasters, damage to critical infrastructure, and disruption of basic services. And they want to increase countries with national and local DRR strategies, international cooperation, availability and access to multi-hazard early warning systems and disaster risk information and assessment. Okay, so focus to this damage to critical infrastructure, which is as built environment professionals or civil engineers. This is where we need to pay attention to mainly, and also by doing that we can achieve these things. Okay, so let me connect that to today's goal, that is sustainable communities and sustainable cities and communities. 11.1, it says again by 2030, same with SFDRR, Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. It says safe, affordable housing and basic services. So basic services are connected to these critical infrastructures. And upgrade slums. By 2030, provide access to, so then transportation systems are again infrastructure systems, improving road safety, vulnerable situations. So we'll be discussing about vulnerable situations, and then women, children, persons with disabilities, and older persons. Why we call them the vulnerable communities or the vulnerable situations? Because if there is something happen, they are the first people to get affected, right? Women, children, persons with disabilities, and older people. And then it says by 2030, significantly reduce the number of deaths, number of people affected, and substantially decrease the direct economic loss relative to, I'm not going to read it, but if you compare that, this 11.5 with this one, this one, this one, this one. So out of these 7 targets, they are like these 4 targets directly related to 11.5. So then how, if we forget or if we ignore Sendai framework for DRR strategies, so then basically in order to achieve that SF Sustainable Development Goal 11, goal number 11, we have to achieve Sendai framework for DRR targets, that those 4 targets, right? So then it has to be then further break it down to actions, action plan to achieve. And in Sri Lanka, I don't see there's a connection between the agencies who are working on achieving sustainable development goals and then the agencies who are working against the fighting against the disasters. They work isolated, right? Then it says by 2030 reduce adverse per capita environment. So I'm not going to read them, but 11.B, it substantially increase the number of cities and human settlements adopting and integrating policies and plans towards so on. And it directly says, refers to Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction 2015 to 2030, holistic disaster risk management at all levels. So just to get an idea about some of you guys, I just asked, okay, so have anyone of you know, like, okay, sustainable development goals are there, goal number 11, that is what we are focusing on. Have you heard about Sendai framework for DRR? Some of them said no, but it's there, right? Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. So this is exactly where in this, like if you're going to achieve sustainable development goals 11 and Sendai framework. So that is why I am telling you this, all these frameworks are interconnected. Paris climate change, SFDRR, which is the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, and sustainable development goals. Not like previous situations. So the Millennium Development Goals are there, Hugo framework for disaster risk reduction, and then others are like all over the place. But now they brought everything into one common language, right? So then when we're trying to map them out, so then these things are you are trying to reduce using Sendai framework. For in this side you have Sendai framework for DRR, and here you are trying to increase, reduce the missing deaths, missing people, affected people, economic losses, and then the damages to the critical infrastructure. Those things we try to reduce, and then these things, policies, frameworks, international corporations, regional, global, regional, national, global frameworks. So these things we want to increase, right? And then they match nicely with different targets of the SFDR, of Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so then comes, there is in my topic there is another term called resilience. If you are asking what is resilience, right? Okay, Sustainable Development Goals, sustainable development is there. So we hopefully we're going to achieve them. But when we in the process of achieving them, the climate change is making certain stresses, or natural and man-made hazards or disasters create certain shocks. But there should be an shock absorbers in the mechanical language, right? So that is the resilience. So you can, just like a spring, when there is a shock or stress, it can get that shock into that to that spring and then get adjusted. more you are resilient as a community or as a society or as a built environment, more you becoming sustainable. So that is the basic of this, right? So then there are three dimensions that is in the resilience. We have to focus on hazard exposure, vulnerability, and preparedness. There are many other dimensions as well, but we can focus mainly onto these three. So then resilience ensures that shocks and stresses. So please pay attention to these two terms, right? Shocks and stresses. Stresses are throughout the process, it will be creating, but more the stress, it can make a big impact if you don't take corrective actions on time. Shocks are sudden and quick, right? So earthquake is a shock, but in order to earthquake to be happen, there are stressors building. There will be early warnings. If you ignore them, that their shocks will happen, right? So this is kind of a overview how to put these stressors and shocks. So then stressors can be created by the climate change, and then climate change, it can be induced sea level rise, environmental degradation, socio-economic, cultural stresses. These stresses are long term, right? The stresses are long term. Even right now in Sri Lanka, we don't know what kind of stresses that building up. Sometimes we might be ignoring them completely. Then since we are ignoring them, we are not being resilient. If we being resilient, we would not face the recession we are facing right now. Resilience means we've been taking proactive actions and taking precautions before that happened. I will come back to that later. So then the shocks are natural disasters. Again, this term I want to highlight: natural disasters and man-made disasters. There are many to talk, but the time is running very fast. So then sustainability and resilience, there is a link. That is the most important thing, right? That is risk management. So with more a society to be called a resilient society, they should be able to manage their risk very well. If they manage the risk properly, they can be resilient, and then they can be achieve the sustainable development. Take any country as an example, and then you can realize that, right? So then this is the key: risk management, right? So then what do you mean by risk? So hazards are there everywhere. Hazards are there. Even right now, if there can be electric shock, and then I can die by that, right? These hazards are there, but hazard become a risk, like indicated in this first one, if you're going to expose yourself to that. So it is like this: natural hazards are there, or man-made hazards are there. If you are not exposed, then there is no risk. So hazard can be by magnitude. You can measure it: intensity, extent, probability, duration, and speed, and so on. And then how vulnerable are you as a country, as a person, as a society, economy? Vulnerability is a very, very important term in this entire dialogue. As a population, how vulnerable are you, right? So then if you are not exposed to that, you are okay, no risk. But sometimes the hazards are there, the systems are being vulnerable, right? So then you are facing a risk. Let me take an example. So then let's say these rocks can fall down. So then you build your house directly underneath that rock falling area. Then, like, if you build the house here, there is no risk because it is not being exposed. But right now it can damage by a wind or whatever, but not from rock fall. but since you constructed your house here, you are exposed. When still there is a hazard and there is only a risk. So risk means there is a probability you being there is an impact being happen by these rocks being falling down. When the rocks being falling down, then there is a damage to the built environment or to human lives. We call it a disaster. I hope it is clear, right? So then the sustainability is there, the resilience is there. Resilience is what we want to achieve in order to achieve in our journey towards sustainability. And there in between there is a risk management. And in order to how to manage the risk, we need to first understand what are the hazards which can create a potential harmful situation, and what are the vulnerabilities or the weaknesses of our system as a society or a culture or whatever, right? Then if you are expose yourself to that, then it can create there is a risk can create a disaster. I hope that is clear, right? So then prevention is the most important thing. If you can prevent it, that would be great. But if you can't prevent it, then what we can do is reduce it. COVID, if you take an example, we try to lock down the country, right? So entire country was locked down. That is prevention, that the virus is not coming in. So if we are in an island, no one coming in with the virus, then we are safe. It is being preventing. But can we stop can we keep the entire country locked down for many years, many months? How can that? Isn't that the consequences that we are facing right now? So then what we can do is live with that and then reduce the risk. So then at the same time, country being slowly opening up, we have to vaccinate and then educate the communities to take not to expose themselves to this virus, right? So that is reduction. Disaster is reduction. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to reduce the hazard exposure, exposing ourselves to the hazards, and we want to reduce the vulnerabilities. So the vulnerabilities, for the example, in the COVID situation, what are the other vulnerabilities? Our immune system. So we have to eat properly, we have to take healthy herbals or whatever, right? And then our vulnerability will go down by getting impacted from this COVID situation. And then we have to be prepared. If we being prepared, we know the vaccinations are going on. Also, we prepared to get the vaccinate. Then we been prepared. So that is, if you can achieve these three, we been resilient. And then if you are resilient, we can manage the risk properly. Then we can achieve our sustainable development goals. Okay, so then this is what we call a risk staircase, right? So then this is the equation of risk is equal to hazard into exposure into vulnerability. So I said, so it is not the simple like mathematical equation. It's just a argument based equation where you say hazard is equal to exposure into vulnerability, right? So what we want to do is we want to reduce the hazard, we want to reduce the exposure, we want to reduce the vulnerability in order to reduce the risk. Okay, so then when we go into manage the risk, what we have to do is, so if we can avoid new risk, that would be great. Completely avoid it. So then we are preventing any risk. So the next step is, if we can't prevent it, similar to like let's say there is a tsunami. So if Sri Lanka being an island, so if we can build a sea wall all around Sri Lanka, then there is no tsunami, right? So tsunami will not come. Just like the Gold Fort, if we can construct a wall all around the country, we are good, right? But how economical that is, how viable that is, right? So then what we have to do is we have to reduce the risk, prevent the disaster from happening. So what is the first thing? Or else disaster can happen and then mitigate the impact. So then we know, okay, this, if that happened, we take different scenarios of disasters and then what kind of damage that can make to our built environment. So then that what kind of impact, so what kind of damage economic wise, so societal wise, then as a number of people being affected and deaths, then we want to reduce the impact. So that is reducing the risk. So third point is, so now disasters can happen. So we prepare and respond. Okay, we are responding to it. What we do is, most of the time in Sri Lanka, what we do is we let disasters to happen and then we deal with it. But in developed part of the world, what they do is they try their best to avoid the risk, or they try to be in this area. For that, you have to spend money at the before the disasters, which is not visible, just like the iceberg, right? So it is like, if you spend more money on this, just like in the iceberg, then you can reduce the risk rather than dealing with the risk. We love to deal with the risk. We love to when there is a flood happen, people go out and help people, and then all these media stations, they go and help, and then that ship disaster, Express Pearl ship disaster happen, and then everyone is going and beach cleanups. That is not the case. That is not, should not be the practice. If you are going to, like, if you remember, the link between resilience and the sustainable development is the risk management. So then risk management is this, right? So this is the risk staircase. Risk, like intelligent, if you being intelligent, we have to always be in this space, because at the, I will show you one case study if I have time. Like if you spend more money on this to stay in this area at the beginning, it will be more it will be costly at the beginning, but it will give more return at the end, rather than you being in this area, right? Okay, so moving on, and then this is what we call disaster management cycle. So this event, let's start with the disaster event, and what you do is you respond. So then you respond, like the flood comes, and then you agencies, the police, army, everyone, you respond, you go and help people and everything, then clean the houses, clean the wells and everything. That is response. And then if there is a house has been destroyed, then you oils like you recover from, you had to go to shelters, you will come back to your house, and then that is recovering. Then we that is reconstructing. Now that disaster cycle go on, but then what you do is we are getting ready for the next one, that is preparedness. Okay, we do forecasting, modeling, scenarios and everything, so we've been prepared. Prevention is better than cure, so we've been prepared. So that is preparedness. So mainly these are the segments of disaster management cycle. So what we have to do is, if you look into the risk management, not go into the details because it might be too much for you guys. What we have to do is, as a resilient, to build a resilient community, what is the difference between a resilient community and a vulnerable community, is that this is the development. So in the process of going the development, so every society in the normal day, they develop. But when there's a shock or stressors being built, stressors being blast as a shock, then your status, your life development will go down. But what is the best thing about resilient communities is they go down, but they have a spring, so that shock will be absorbed by that spring, and then they will put back better sometimes, right? So then you were right here, but your future condition is better than where you have been. That is the resilient community. So they learn from the mistakes and then they bounce back. But the vulnerable communities, what happen is, with every shock, they go down, they go down, they go down. Look, Sri Lanka for an example, where we were, right? With every shock, we have been going down, going down, going down. Every shock, we have been going down. Why? We've been vulnerable. Why we been vulnerable is why we are not managing the risk properly. Why we are not managing the risk properly is because we are not investing on the preparedness or prevention of disasters, right? So like what will happen is, disasters can happen, so it can go down, and then again disaster happen, you go down. Like being vulnerable, you go down, 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 down. So then you will not achieve the sustainable development goals ever, right? So then this is the like normal without any disaster, nothing happens. So your GDP is there, and then you develop. Then what will happen? Disasters can happen and happen and happen, will go down. But if you strengthen your country's resilience, then if you can put that shock absorbers in between these disasters, you can uplift the country and then build a resilient community, and then only you can, every community will go down. Look at Italy. We were talking about Italy being, the people being killed in the streets in Italy. UK same, US, we were laughing at USA. Now what happened? They were going out without mask, right? New Zealand, resilient communities, right? So why what is the reason? Because there's investing on this resilience, building the resilience, right? Okay, so again, this is the disaster management cycle in a more detailed manner. Sri Lanka, what we do is we spend more money on response, but what we have to do is we have to stop paying. Like even Sri Lankan disaster management center is called disaster management center, right? We waiting for disasters to be managed, right? So disaster management center, not disaster risk management center. It has to be disaster risk management, right? So then what we have to move towards is more money, more spending on mitigation, disaster risk reduction, and prevention. Then only as a society we can. So we are here, and then if your approach is more prevention and mitigation, then only as a spiral we can go up and up and up. That will make our society more resilient. Okay, let's take a couple of disasters happen in Sri Lanka, right? So this is a very tragic situation, because this natural environment now we can't recover that. How come? You can call, like we can say that we have cleaned the beach, but what about these turtles and all these fish who died, right? Nothing politics here, right? But why didn't we take actions beforehand, right? Why didn't we prevent it? Why there was no emergency management plan for that ship disaster, like ship being the ship fire being stopped at there itself, or not letting that ship to be entered into our shorelines, right? And what will happen, what would have been happen, that another that ship could have come to our harbor, and then that fire could have been occurred, right? Then what will happen? Do we have a plan, right? So then now we got 720 million as a compensation. Okay, can we compensate that damage by this money, right? So that is what we have to think. So if we could have stopped it at the beginning, we could have saved, right? And now this is in Gulf of Mexico, where a gas tunnel being erupted, and then there was a fire occurred, right? And then the sea started the fire. The water started burning, right? Can you imagine? Right, there was why not these pipelines were being monitored of any leakages, right? And this is Kotmale Dam, the road going on top of the Kotmale Dam. There was a very big sinkhole. Have you done any risk management planning? And then what will happen? These are the early warning. These are the stressors which I was talking about. Still, there is no shock. Still the dam is safe. But what will happen in the future? Do we have a contingency plan for this? Okay, so then this is the cost of all the natural disasters. Like I am highlighting again and again these natural disasters cost in billions. It is gradually going up, right? And then the cost is going up, the deaths are gradually decreasing compared to previous years. But our target is the GDP in the Sendai and also in Sustainable Development Goals. Our target is to bring down deaths as well as the economic damage, because the economic damage will impact to our resilience, right? That was our whole argument. Okay, so I have continuously mentioned like this data is from very valid sources, but throughout they are talking natural disasters. But nature doesn't create any disasters. There is no natural disaster. If you are using that term, please don't use it. Nature doesn't create disasters. There are natural phenomena. We being selfish, we being go and intervene these, expose ourselves. Remember that term, expose. We expose ourselves in these situations, like there is a volcano, and then we civilize that, we build a urbanization, and then we call it urbanization or whatever, and then we will be like a very nice villa, hotels and everything in that area, and then we expose ourselves, and then the volcano erupted, and then hazard, exposure and vulnerability. So then there is a vulnerability of these houses, right? Then there is a death and then damage. So is that a natural disaster? Nature did the nature created it? No, nature was, the volcanic eruption was there. It's a natural phenomenon, right? Just like that, anything can, the natural phenomena are there, but these can be induced by human actions. This climate change, climate is always changing. We've been through the ice ages. Now globe is warming up. But anthropogenic actions can make these stresses happen so fast. Okay, so now what we can do? So people are arguing, can the development be made without damaging the environment, right? So then there was one woman who is fighting to protect one tree. So there were many arguments back and forth. That is, I mean, arguments and the debates are good, because otherwise the societies will not go forward, right? So then the common argument from these politicians is that in order to develop, we have to deforestate, cut down the trees. Why only in Sri Lanka that the forest cover is going down when the other countries, their forest cover is going up? Okay, so then the development, we had to make it sustainable, right? So then we have to think about the development that does not take risk into account cannot sustain, right? System that is effective in managing risk is like to become more resilient to shocks and stresses. So that is what I have been telling you. So what we are going to right now is the shocks and stresses. If you can remember like the illustration where COVID-19, recession, climate change, right? So now the second wave is coming. That is the recession. Recession is there, and then the next will come the food issue, food scarcity, right? Are we ready for that? Then the stresses are building. Are we reading these stresses correctly? Early warnings are there. Early warnings are there. Are we reading these early warnings correctly, right? Shocks and stresses. I got this from UNDRR. They are like astrologers. No, they are saying what is going to happen in the future, but these politicians, they don't listen. They are busy with their own political agenda, how to make themselves sustainable in the future. Whatever the political party, the situation is same. That is the unfortunate situation in these developing countries. Look at this, what is happening in developing countries. Poor and developed, I know that time is way past the allocated time, but developing countries are having these stresses and shocks more compared to developed countries, and then we don't have that shock absorber, and then we making ourselves more and more vulnerable, and also people being urbanizing in the hazard prone areas, we are making ourselves exposed to that as well. So in the Sendai framework, they have 4 priorities for action. I want to highlight them and then I will stop. So we need to first understand the risk. What are the risks? Like risk can be COVID-19 risk is different to climate change risk, is different to flood risk, is different to tsunami risk, is different. This is multi-hazard approach we have to take, and then what kind of disaster risk is there in Sri Lanka? We have to understand. And strengthening disaster risk governance. So then the policies has to be made in order to strengthen disaster risk governance, and then not to respond, but to prepare ourselves to better manage risk. And investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, that is priority number 3. Investment, we have to make investment. Priority number 4, I will show you where the response is, that is build back better in recovery. So we will building back houses better to withstand the disasters and enhance disaster preparedness. Here only where disaster response is. In Sri Lanka, that is where we are focusing on disaster response. Okay, when something happens, vaccines are coming in, and then when the flood is coming, we spend money on people, communities, 5,000, everything. That is response. Look, 4 priorities are there. In very small areas, response is there. Look, show me anywhere in these 3 priorities, response is never mentioned. It's all about risk management. That is where the world is heading. But I don't know what we are doing. We are not taking these things seriously. Okay, so 4 priorities: understand disaster risks, investing on disaster resilience, preparedness for response, recovery, and reconstruction, strengthening disaster risk governance. These are the 4 priorities, and it has to be done in global, regional, national, and local. Right. So then. My presentation is, I have many slides to show you, but since time is running out, I will show you a couple more slides. One thing is that this is the UDA new proposal, and green building ratings are there, which is really good, but disasters or hazards are not mentioned anywhere. So in the new proposals also in UDA, it is not there. It is good that if we been included them as well. And another thing which I want to highlight is, okay, sustainability and disaster resilience, are they different to each other? It is not. We have to think the life cycle of a building by strengthening the buildings to achieve this sustainable, because like in order to make this disaster resilient, it has to strengthen the building. So more concrete, more cement, more and more materials. But if you look at the short term, it will be unsustainable. But if you look at the life cycle of the building, it will be like life cycle of a building, it will be sustainable. And this is UK situation. Look, this is I actually got it from one of our friends shared this with us. So then only like they don't build. What they do is they repair, remodel, retrofit the old buildings, right? And there's a beauty in the imperfection, right? It's okay to keep it as it is, right? And there's only one thing I want to highlight before stop the presentation, that is, rather than focusing on hazard repair, invest on disaster resilience aspects into our infrastructure. That is because it will be long term. If you consider long term, the buildings will be more profitable or economical than conventional buildings. So that is the situation where conventional buildings being more expensive than the enhanced buildings. So as you can see, if you look at life cycle, the conventional buildings, the cost is more. That is because it is due to the disasters and everything, there can be damages. But enhanced buildings, it will be more economical and viable. Yeah, with that, I will stop. Yeah, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And then since I care this so much, I can go on and on. That is the situation. Randul, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandana, and I believe it was a very comprehensive and very informative session. And me myself had a lot to learn from that. And thank you very much for that session. And saying that, now the time for the question and answers. If you have any questions, you can direct it to us through the Zoom chat method. And me myself also noted down a few couple of questions during the lecture. So let me start the question and answer session. So in the presentation, Dr. Chandana, you mentioned that there is a lack of regulations in the Sri Lankan context when it comes to the disaster risk reduction. And even in the recent UDA regulations, it's not well mentioned. So what are your remarks regarding that matter? And the second part of that question is, what is the role of UNDRR in Sri Lanka in promoting the concepts of disaster risk reduction?
Yeah, it's a very, very valid question, Randula. Like, if you look at this Sendai framework for DRR, so it's always talking about international cooperation and global partnerships, and also they are talking about this strengthening the frameworks. So these countries with national and local DRR strategies by 2020. So then right now there are many frameworks in Sri Lanka, but there is no such one valid framework. Now we are living in 2021, almost 7 months gone. Still we don't have a framework aligned with this Sendai framework global targets, achieving these global targets. So then, and like they are saying, what they are proposing us is UNDRR and these international agencies is to come up with the national and local strategies. It's not that they are saying take our strategy and use it. It is not. You have to localize it and then use it at the grassroots level to the national level. And you might have technical agencies, and for the technical agencies also create another different strategies. So if we had DRR strategies, then we would never face this situation, because we haven't had. But Sri Lanka being an island, so how many ship marine disasters happened like last 10 years, right? But still we don't have. So that is the situation. It is very important, but unfortunately we don't have. That is the thing. So then what we can do is positive. In a positive note, we are trying. I'm the secretary of Association of Disaster Risk Management Professionals. As an organization, we are trying to enhance the dialogue among these technical agencies to come up with their own strategies. And the stakeholders, it's in the Sendai framework, they are talking about stakeholders, role of stakeholders. We want to promote this dialogue, and then we brought every disaster professional into one platform. If you go to our website, these stakeholders are there. So we want to enhance dialogue, and we are planning to do that in the very near future. So we also have a role to play as academics and the practitioners. Yeah, as you said, in the UDA guidelines also it is not there. So that is a problem.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Chandana. And we have a question from the audience. It mentions, according to the definition of sustainability, we have to save all kinds of materials that we are using of construction for the future generations. But in disaster resilient point of view, it is not a good practice. I think what he tries to mention is like when you try to upgrade the buildings, like you had to use more materials. So there is, how do you define this fine line between the design scale and cost and the sustainability?
That's a very good question, actually. So then I actually had, if I had a time, I could have explained that. So then like why we want to, like, question is very correct, and the point is also very correct. So when you make a disaster resilient construction, for example, if you build it for earthquake resilience, we have to put shock absorbers, so our foundation has to be more reinforced. if you're going to make it for tsunami resilient, then your lateral force has to be stopped. So then your these walls has to be strengthened, or the columns has to be strengthened, and you have to go to 2 stories maybe, right? So then disaster resilience promoting, we go to the concrete instead of maybe bricks. But the problem is, if you look, we have to look at the life cycle of the building, right? So then we have to look at the life cycle of the building, not one aspect. For example, if you're going to have it is good to have in a sustainable point of view, good to have a rooftop building, rooftop in top of your building, but that will make a high mass concentration on the top. So then that is not good for earthquakes, right? So then we have to look it from a very holistic point of view, and also we have to think of the entire life cycle of the building, the life cycle assessment that we call it. So then the life cycle assessment, so the biggest impact to the environment happen at the design and construction stage. So then if you make small repairs here and there and retrofit it and then remodel it, and then you can enhance the life cycle of that building more, and the demolition of that building will not happen, right? So then the debris will happen not in 10 years, but 10, 15, 20, 30 years later. So then we are not going for new structures. We get the existing structure itself. There will be no debris. Therefore, existing structure is strengthened enough, and then that structure we can further strengthen and can be used. It's more like a recycle of a building, right? And then it's called the second life of a building. But in like that is what happening in countries like UK. So they don't promote new construction. Instead, they are promoting to use, like if you go to UK, like I have been there couple of times, most of their buildings are old. The apartments are sometimes old, but still they are using it, right? What we do, what in Sri Lanka, what we do is we can demolish the old buildings and then we construct new buildings. So that is the problem. So 2 points. One is use the existing buildings with retrofitting, remodeling, and then the repairs, use it further. And then if you are going to if you Randula, my advice to you, if you're going to marry, use your father's house and strengthen that, and then go for 2 stories. Don't build new house, right? And then secondly, when you are building new house, build it with disaster resilient features, or it's not for house mainly. If you are going for towers or like commercial construction, adds some resilient features, like then it will, the life cycle can be expanded than normal building. So that is my answer for that. So in, like, if please Google wabi sabi, that is a Japanese architectural like not architecture, Japanese concept. They use it for Japanese architecture, where they say these imperfections are beautiful, right? So they keep the raw building as it is. So that way they try to make it the buildings more sustainable while strengthening the disaster performance of that building. Okay, so then we actually give me 1 second to share this chart here. There we did a study actually with the Green Building Council, Professor Ranjit Disanayake, and with one of students for her masters. So then she studied couple of projects with the hazard resilience, so the existing building tool. So we have actually developed this try to integrate disasters into this green building ratings, and then what will happen if there is a disaster to this that existing building, and then so then we had to strengthen this building in order to get this gold rating. So it will be not enough as it is. So that is the point. So then hopefully in the future, this green building rating system hopefully will be incorporating disaster resilient features. And Professor Ranjit Disanayake, they are going to expand it for city resilience as well, green rating tool for cities, and they are going to integrate these disaster features as well. So it is happening in Sri Lanka. Hopefully down the road they will integrate these things. in UDA regulation is there, the green rating, which is a good thing. Yeah, I hope I have answered.
Yeah, thank you very much for that comprehensive answer, Dr. Chandan. And we have another question from the audience. It says in Sri Lanka, we see that most of the recently developed cities are undergoing issues related to waste management frequently. Considering the outcomes of these disasters, are we in a position to replan and redevelop the cities, though it would incur a high cost?
Yeah, so then as I said, this Green Building Council, so they are in a process of, I think they have done a presentation as well for this there to explain you guys about this their new tool of green city planning tool. I am also part of doing this part of another one study with them. So one of the students is doing that study, how to integrate tsunamis into city planning, green city planning. So the waste management, we can like not directly connected to disasters, but it can create stressors. Like if you look at this Blumendal disaster, where you put waste and waste and waste, at the end of the day, it created a disaster. Around 13 people died from that. So then that point it can create stressors and can lead to disasters. Other than that, it have to look it from the green city planning point of view, and then in the long run we have to integrate these disaster features into that. Not sure whether I have answered that question or not. So that is what we are proposing at the moment.
Right, thank you very much, sir. We have another question that I jotted down. So like there's an aspect of things, but when it comes to the community, what the community and volunteers can do when it comes to the disaster reduction and regarding the like communities and cities, what are our role? What would be our role?
So discussion and getting awareness is one of the major things, right? So being aware about what is happening around the world, as well as about this different frameworks, their targets and all that is very important. As well as vulnerability, I have mentioned vulnerability can be your physical vulnerability, your social vulnerability. Being uneducated is also vulnerability, because not aware about disasters is a vulnerability as well, right? So for example, when tsunami came, first wave came, the sea went in, like sea went inside, like in more like towards the sea, creating more land in the shore area. If you ask from your elders, they will tell you there was this complete shoreline was empty, and then people start to flock into that area and then claiming that lands. They thought, okay, sea has gone away. That is the awareness, right? So then the education is very important when it comes to disaster management. Education, and then we can talk about capacity building, right? So then that will lead to the preparedness. So then I have spoken about this the prevention and the importance of preparedness, being prepared. So as volunteers, that is why I highly advocate these kind of volunteer organizations, and then young people coming together by their own, not part of their curriculum, by their own, because we can't teach everything inside the classrooms in our curriculums. It has to be these kind of forums has to be discussed current issues, and then these young people has to be equipped for the have more like not like our elder generations. Young generation has to be educated more and more about what is happening, and then only they can, when they grow up, they can develop policies which will help us to enhance the resilience and help us to achieve these sustainable development goals, right? I hope Randula, I have answered it properly. Like, I mean, doing small things, even picking up a toffee cover from the street is a small step towards a very long journey of achieving these 17 targets, right?
Yeah, Dr. Chandra, thank you very much for that answer. And we have a very timely question from Chatra Nilanka. It's mentioned that, so you mentioned about upcoming food scarcity. Are there any precaution, any solution from green building concept?
Very good question. So then the buildings itself, like now if you look at these green building rating systems, they do have, they are promoting have a rooftop garden, and then there are vacant spaces where you can cultivate or harvest, and then you can use rainwater even, right? So then if there is a water scarcity, then you can use the rainwater, recycle it, because then as a building you can get more marks for the green rating. So that will enhance the green building concept. Like, you please go through the green rating system. So then that will be win-win situation. And also as a hobby, as the previous question, as volunteers or the community, we have to be prepared. There is no other choice, right? So then and also educating our elderly people or the communities about getting more harvest, or else applying digital technologies into their harvesting methods than kind of previous methods. How to be more aware about weather conditions, weather patterns, using, like, now there are apps available actually with a certain the telecommunication providers. They have developed these certain apps where these farmers, they can check the weather from their phone, or else based on the weather conditions, the water and then the other fertilizer can be managed. These IoT based technologies are there. So that is very good question, timely as well. But those are my comments where we can integrate green building concepts. Yeah, in every house, every land we can cultivate by starting ourselves. Secondly, integrating this new technology based applications. It is like sometimes they are freely available, even not that like out of their things anymore. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. I think it'll be helpful for most of the people. And we have another question. So you have stated that disasters are not naturally occurred and they are created by the people. As a developing country, can we refrain from these inevitable becoming a disaster?
Yeah, again, a very good question. So this natural phenomenons, what happen is, so like, for example, if you look at this, what is happening in this central hilly area right now, right? So our ancient civilization, they never touched the central hilly area, but we build big dams, because that is because that we don't have a much understanding about the geological cross section of these areas, right? So then now there are small tremors happening. So these are the stressors, right? Stressors building. So then if we ignore these stressors, now Buvelikada, that house completely collapsed. So we blame the owner and then we ignore. In the Kotmale, that there was a sinkhole, so we ignored it. So in the Digana, there were tremors. So now the early warnings are there. So we can't blame if a massive tremor destroying one dam, and then that cascade, that water flow cascading to another dam, and then that cascading to another, creating a massive disaster. That is, we can't blame the nature for that. That is, we been ignoring the early warning signs of the nature, right? And then creating more and more stresses to the nature itself, because we disturb that land mass, right? So then we been as a developing country, so we can't say always we are developing country, we are low middle income country or whatever, right? So that is not the point. So like, point is, get listening to this nature, the early warning signs, and then getting corrective actions at least. Yeah, But it's a very good question.
Thank you. Running out of time, we only have the time to accommodate one more question. And since most of the people who are joining with us today are undergraduates and will be playing a decision-making role in the future. So even though it's not actively prevalent in the country, in regulations, reduction in the country, but in the future it should be. So how the capacity building should happen, and how the technology should be transferred, and where should we look at if we come to a decision-making role in the future?
Yeah, mainly that's a very good question, Randul, and I always believe in this youth and then young people. Like whenever like, that is why actually I came to Sri Lanka, even like to teach this cream of the country. When I got the opportunity in at University of Moratuwa, I was so happy because I had to teach to the best of the best students, and as well as all the other young people. They are very talented, but issue is we are not getting the fullest potential out of them. So there are many things that you can go follow the path that you can walk in, and then do many wrong things. But the point is, as you correctly pointed out, so then how we can these youngsters capacity can be built, right? So then main thing is like one thing is forums like this, that is one thing. And then as academia, we have to play a big role on at least giving making these ingredients to make a better person close to them, right? So like that we can't do it. Like if you're going to do through this conventional teaching learning environment, you can't do it, because then you will refuse it, because you don't like exams. So then through these clubs and societies, and then through our informal learnings only, we can build the capacity. So then again, these technical agencies have a role to play in like also these voluntary organizations such as our organization, Association of Disaster Management Professionals. We do have a student society. So then through this student society also, we can do many things to the students about if I ask you, Randula, have you ever heard about the Sendai framework for DRR before this session?
During the lectures one time, I think you mentioned, but
yeah.
Before that,
yeah, it is not out there. It is not the fault of young people not knowing that. It is the fault of us not teaching that, right? So putting it out and making it mainstream. And also other thing is, Randula, the role models of the young generation, which is very important. I really love people like Asha DeVos being a role model, and then she actually made by her own, she played a major role. A technical agency even couldn't even match what she has done. So if you are telling that volunteers can't do anything, I will take her as an example, because she single-handedly monitored. So this everything measured like she working with Professor Charita Pattiarachchi, who is a professor working in the University of Perth, Australia, Sri Lankan born, now based in Australia. So this is the tracking of chlorophyll, I guess. So then she with the volunteers, they like go to they have a website. They have tracked nurdles, right? So volunteers, they were updating these nurdles, where are the locations of these nurdles. So then that is the role of volunteers, the people, the individuals. They can do many things. They can turn, they can lead a movement. Nothing political, nothing political. It's all about love for the country and love for the environment, like love for the cause that you truly believe in, right? So that is what I have to say about that thing. And then there are people out there still doing many things individually as a collective also.
Thank you very much, Dr. I think it was a very insightful. Most of the students here has a lot to get from that. And saying that, and thank you again for joining with us today. We come for the conclusion of today's discussion. And to deliver the vote of thanks, I would like to invite Sasindhu Randil Samaravikram for the University of Moratuwa, and he's the ambassador regarding the Sustainable Development Goal number 11. Over to you, Sasindhu.
Sorry. Thank you, Randula. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes, okay. All good.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Actually, this is an webinar initiated by G17 University Ambassador Consortium with the aim of making university undergraduates well aware about Sustainable Development Goal number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. So it's a great privilege to me to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of an audience who are really concerned about the sustainable built environment. First and foremost, I would like to thank our resource person, Dr. Chandana Sirivardhana, Senior Lecturer from Department of Civil Engineering, University of Moratuwa. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation and sharing valuable thoughts and ideas with us. Secondly, I would like to thank our moderator, my friend Randul Abevira, finally undergraduate from University of Moratuwa. Also, I would like to thank our executive board, G17 University Ambassador Consortium, for providing the instructions to succeed my project, and all my fellow ambassadors for supporting me. Finally, I would like to thank all the invitees, participants present here in making this webinar success. At last but not least, I would like to thank Mr. Ashant Pereira, the founder of Road to Rights organization, who initiated the G17 University Ambassador Consortium platform and providing more opportunities for the university undergraduates to improve their skills while contributing to achieve the dream of sustainable Sri Lanka 2030. Thank you all. It's a good discussion that we had, and we all can get together and initiate these facts to build a better future. Once again, thank you. Signing off, I'm Sasindhu Randil, G17 University Ambassador of Sustainable Development Goal number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities from University of Moratuwa. Good night all, stay safe. Over to you, Randul.
Thank you very much, Sasindhu. Thank you very much for organizing this wonderful session. And we have a special notice after there will be a Zoom vote about the session. I would like to invite all the participants to fill that for us. And saying that, thanking our resource person, Dr. Chandana Sirivardhana, for joining with us and giving these wonderful ideas and knowledge to us. And thank you again for everyone who's joining. I would like to end up the session, and I'm Randula Devira, your moderator of the session, and have a nice day. Thank you.